Welcome back to the book club, my forever world where I make an episode anytime I finish a book. And if you're seeing this episode, that means another book is finished. Woohoo! And you might be asking, whoa, what book, King of Candles? I definitely didn't read the title. What book are we talking about? Well, it's The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Well, you might be wondering now, oh, King of Candles, what are you going to build this episode? You always build something when you talk about a book. Or at least like gather materials for it. Well, this is Fort Oxbow, if you're not familiar. We've got some cool businesses, we've got some cool houses, but what we don't have is a building of central governance. Government's kind of important, and what better book to complement a build than the 48 Laws of Power? Because it's government and government power, government. You guys get it. But yeah, right here we're going to be building a courthouse. From what I've been able to read, Old West towns like this would have a courthouse if it's like the seat of the county. And that's lore. And well, speaking of lore, last episode we did come upon a magical item here in the steel mill, which is our immersion ruining building because there's no interior. But we found this lore stick, really, really magical, guys. It's lore. But last time I right-clicked this lore stick and I built the entire floor, so I'm really curious to see what happens this time. Lore, everybody, are we ready? 3, 2, 1... Lore, 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 lore. Whoa, that was crazy. Did we just suddenly build the amazing oozing slime snow golem farm by Big Booty 17? Oh my gosh, we did! Ah, I'm so happy. Let's see, what happens if we hit it this time? Whoa, no way, my body, I don't know what's going on. I'm building a chamber. It's a new chamber for the iron golems. Oh my gosh, wow, and now when they die, oh my gosh, everything's gonna be sorted by these cool copper golems in this little factory section. Whoa, whoa, we're making a super smelter, and we're also making a lava farm that fuels it. Wow, that's so crazy. Look at all this cool stuff. This must be lore. Let's see what the lore stick gave us this time. It looks like we've got a cool new chamber for the iron golems to fall into. And then all their drops get moved into this chamber where an iron golem sorts it. How cool. So right here, the guy's going to sort it into this, which goes into the copper chest here. And this guy's going to be like, wow, iron, so cool. And he puts it into this chest. And then hopefully this... Yeah, look at that. That means another block is crafted. So anytime a block gets crafted, I've got a little observer looking, and it just it creates a thing. And then over here, this guy, he collects roses from this dude. He puts it into a little composter action, and then it gets turned into bone blocks. Now, I want to show off this thing real quick. It's a super smelter. I don't even know if this works. I designed it in creative, and I think it works, because it's just a minecart going on hoppers. And then, well, I've got hoppers that collect it from the furnaces. The really cool thing is up here. Let me just fill my inventory with sticks. And then I can grab a couple of these buckets. And what happens is we've got that trick with the lava where you can have infinite lava. And if I right-click this with a full inventory, the bucket will just pop out and go into a hopper. And this is what fuels the farm, not the farm, the super smelter down below. So every now and then I can just come by and, you know, I can probably run along and just, yeah, right-click everything. You know, maybe this lore stick can do, like, one more thing for us. Let's see, 3, 2, 1. It's not working. Whoa, what the heck? What's up with my hand? Oh my gosh, it took my shirt. That's right, we've got a oh, let me take this off so you can actually see it. We've got a brand new King of Candles skin. Oh my gosh. This solves a couple of the problems I had with the older skin, which is mostly that skin looked really funny in armor. This looks a lot more natural. And the colors, they're brighter and happier. I like it. And for lack of a good transition, we're now talking about the book. And as I talk about the book, I'm going to be gathering materials for the build, and then we'll have a nice pretty montage. But yeah, we're going to need a lot of mangrove and a lot of netherrack. So yeah, the 48 Laws of Power is a pretty self-explanatory title. It is 48 laws on power. For this book specifically, it focuses on court politics mostly. So like how to make sure you're powerful within like a political sphere. And each chapter is structured in a very specific way. So each chapter has basically 2 parts. The first part is called the transgression of the law, which shows an example from history of someone not doing the law correctly and why, it didn't work out for them. And then it shows an example from history of the correct implementation of the law. But like I said, there are 48 laws in this book, which if you can do math properly, if I spend a minute talking about each of these laws, it's going to be a very long episode, specifically 48 minutes. So I'm going to attempt to talk about all 48 of these laws, hopefully within 30 seconds for each one, because that'd still be 24 minutes, which is really long, but we're going to do it, starting with Law 1, never outshine the master. So Galileo is a very smart man, but he also needs someone to fund all of his research. So unlike many of the scientists during his time, he dedicated all of his research to one family, the Medici family. And so every scientific discovery of his was because of the brilliance of the Medici family. So the Medici family was never offended by Galileo's research because it was attributed to them. And since he never outshined the Medicis, he had a steady position as their court philosopher or mathematician. Law 2, never trust friends, use your enemies. During the reign of the Chinese Emperor Sung, there were a lot of coups from the military. So during one dinner, the emperor has the opportunity to poison all of the generals and kill them all. But instead, he tells them, hey, I could have killed you, but I want you all to go and retire and go live with your families. And they're like, okay, thanks for not killing me. I'm eternally grateful. And they retire and become the nobility and never mess with him because they're thankful for their lives. Friends will expect something from you. Enemies will be grateful you don't kill them. So that's why you should be friends with your enemies. Law 3, conceal your intentions. So Otto von Bismarck is a Prussian congressman, and he's part of a political party that's very pro-war, but he decides to break with his party and defend the king who's anti-war, and the king rewards him by giving him an office in the government, and Bismarck ends up just using his position in the government to strengthen the military and eventually just go to war anyway. But because he concealed his intentions, he was able to get that position in the first place. Law 4, say less than necessary. King Louis XIV of France would have his members of the court, so like his nobility, whenever they wanted to propose an idea to him, they'd just go up and propose their ideas. And then no matter what he thought of the ideas, at the end he would always say, I shall see. So by doing this, he didn't waste a lot of time with people coming up to him after and try to convince him. And he also never made any social blunders by just saying something that he probably shouldn't have said. Law 5, guard reputation with your life. So this Chinese warlord named Chuko Liang had a reputation for trickery. So one day his military was very weak and he wanted them to retreat from a city. So he went and stood up on a wall and just played a guitar while the enemy army approached. And because of his reputation for trickery, they thought he was playing a trick on them, so they decided not to engage and destroy his retreating weak army. So the reputation there saved his life. Law 6, court attention at all costs. People will always feel superior to others that they can predict, so you gotta remain unpredictable. There's a showman named P.T. Barnum, and, if you're a showman, you gotta attract crowds, which are just attention. And so what he would do whenever he'd open up a little show area is he would have a homeless guy that he hired, and he would just have the homeless guy walk around and lay bricks, and all the bricks would lead to the museum. So it was courting attention in the city, and that's how he got a lot of his show money. Law 7, get others to work, take the credit yourself. So the goal here is to be a businessman of ideas, not the creator of the ideas themselves. This is most evident in the example of Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla. Tesla actually worked for Edison for quite a bit, but Edison would just take his ideas and sell them. And for the vast majority of at least Americans, it's Thomas Edison that we remember for creating the light bulb and a lot of electrical things, not Nikola Tesla. But also, you gotta keep in mind law number 1 of not outshining the master. If you want to stay in favor with people, you can't be taking the credit for everything. Henry Kissinger would never take credit for a lot of Richard Nixon's foreign policy accomplishments, even though he himself had designed them. So just a thing to keep in mind. Law 8, make people come to you. You need to control the situation. After the Napoleonic Wars, Napoleon Bonaparte was banished to the island of Elba, which is right off the coast of Italy. And then the French diplomat Talleyrand, who was in charge of the French side of negotiations, he was having a rough time trying to convince people of peace because whenever they wouldn't get something they wanted, like Russia and Poland, so whenever Russia would be denied Poland in the peace deals, the Russians would just threaten to release Napoleon and go back to war. So Talleyrand was getting really annoyed with Napoleon. So what he did is, instead of destroying Napoleon's reputation himself, he convinced the British to let Napoleon escape from the island of Elba, and Napoleon came back to France, built a military, and then lost at Waterloo. In doing this, Napoleon's reputation was ruined. Napoleon now has negative aura because he lost at Waterloo, and the Russians can't use him, and peace talks can continue. Law 9. Win through actions, not words. Show and tell, everybody. So this somewhat famous artist named Michelangelo, he was working on the Statue of David, and the guy funding the Statue of David project didn't like David's nose. And Michelangelo, he knows that, the nose is actually perfectly fine, it's just where the guy is standing. But instead of, just embarrassing this guy, he goes up and fake works on the nose a bit, and then he leads the guy to a different area to look at David, and the guy looks at it and he's like, wow, yeah, you did a great job on that nose. It looks so much better, even though he didn't do anything. Law number 10, avoid the unhappy and the unlucky. In Roman history, during the fall of the Republic, there's a guy named Cassius, and Cassius is no good. He convinces Brutus, which is the friend of Julius Caesar, that Caesar's actually really bad and evil. So Brutus ends up helping with the plot to kill Caesar and helps stab Caesar multiple times. But it's because he surrounded himself with people like Cassius that he ever found himself in that conspiracy in the first place. So yeah, don't do that. Law 11, keep people dependent on you. We're back to talking about our boy Otto von Bismarck. When he was new to Parliament, he could have joined that one political party we were talking about that's very pro-war, but instead he noticed that the king was very weak. So what he ended up doing is spending a lot of time defending this unpopular king and his policies. And so the king became dependent on him to get anything passed in Parliament at all. Bismarck was sort of his strongman. This was also the case for the next king that came up during the German Empire. And because the kings were dependent on him, he was able to force his desires of having a strong military and going to war. And so the book makes the point that the ultimate freedom is being relied upon because it gives you the freedom to act however you want. Law 12. Use selective honesty to disarm. There's this con artist named Count von Lustig, and he goes to a world-famous Chicago mob boss, Al Capone. He's like, hey, Al Capone, give me money. I know how to double your money. And so Count von Lustig just puts this in a bank account, and then once the time period's done, he comes back to Al Capone. He's like, sorry, man, I couldn't double your money. Here's the 50K back. And then Al Capone's like, oh my gosh, you're like an honest person? There's not many honest people like you in the world. Here's 5K. I love honest men. So if you're selectively honest to people that only deal with dishonest men, you'll end up having a great time. Law 13. When asking for help, appeal to their interests. Corcyra and Corinth are at war. This is in ancient Greece, and they're trying to get Athens on their side. The diplomats from Corcyra are like, hey, I know we've never been buds, but we've got a big navy and we could help you beat the Spartans. Come help us. And the people of Corinth, they're like, hey, Athens, we've been friends for this many years. You're kind of obligated to help us because we've helped you so many times in the past, blah, 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 blah. They also cite a bunch of Hellenistic law, but at the end of the day, Athens sides with Corcyra, which offers them help against the Spartans, because that's what they really need. Law 14. Pose as a friend, work as a spy. So there's this art dealer named Duveen, and he's trying to get this rich guy named Melon to be one of his, his customers, and Melon's like, I want no part of Duveen, he's a scummy person. So what Duveen ends up doing is just paying for all of this Melon guy's servants and stuff, and he has the servants all report back to him, and then the servants all work together to set up an accidental encounter between the two, where Melon decides that, Duveen actually is an agreeable person, and Duveen has great taste in art. This is because Duveen's servants have been reporting all of Melon's interests back, so Duveen knows exactly what Melon likes and is able to do that. Law 15. Crush your enemies completely. So there's a Chinese girl named Wu Chao who lives in the Emperor's harem, which is a place that he just keeps a lot of young women he can sleep with. And this girl ends up falling in love with the Emperor's son, And once the emperor dies, she has to join a convent, but because of her love with the sun makes a law to free her from the convent. And the empress at the time is very infertile and is having problems producing a child. But when this new emperor has a child with Wu Shao kills the kid, and then she frames the empress, so the empress is executed for killing the heir of the king. And then she just keeps killing sons so that nobody can take over her throne. And the emperor dies, and then she's just left. And so she rules China for 80 years. So yeah, crush your enemies completely. Kill your children. Law 16. Use absence to increase respect and honor. So this is basically a supply and demand thing. If the public sees you a lot, you're not going to be demanded. But back in the day, the Assyrians were kicked out, and there was a time of anarchy. But there was this one guy named Diocles, and the public loved him because he was very fair. So whenever there were disputes, you'd just go to Diocles. But then Diocles retired, and the public was freaking out because it was anarchy again. So they demanded Diocles come back, and he agrees to come back only if they build him a palace and blah blah blah. And he gets his palace, and now he's the king of Persia. And he limited his interactions with the public so much that he ended up being viewed as a religious figure. Law 17. Keep others in suspended terror. Cultivate an air of unpredictability. So back in the olden times, during the chess competitions, there's a guy named Spassky and there's a guy named Fischer. And based on previous games, Spassky is just way better than Fischer. So what Fischer does is he keeps threatening to withdraw from a tournament, and he keeps showing up late. And then in their first match, he deliberately blunders a ton. And then the second match, he just doesn't even show up and forfeits. But then the third match, he starts beating Spassky by just doing random stuff. And he keeps doing random stuff, and it keeps throwing Spassky off to the point where Spassky, accuses him of cheating. And yeah, Spassky just ends up looking really crazy in this tournament and ends up forfeiting, so then Fischer ended up winning. By being unpredictable, you cause your enemy to blunder. Law 18. Isolation is dangerous. So the French king Louis XIV came to power after a civil war between the nobility and the monarchy. So then in order to not isolate the nobility again and let them scheme, he keeps all of the nobility in the Palace of Versailles. And there they end up squabbling over who gets to do the king's chores, who gets to dress the king. But the main takeaway from this section is that humans are social creatures and isolating yourself isn't good. You want to be at the center of society. Law 19. Don't offend the wrong person. So there's this random kingdom that gets some diplomats sent by a random Mongolian dude named Genghis Khan. And Genghis Khan's like, hey, can I use your roads so I can open up the Silk Road again? And the guy just kills his diplomats. And this random Mongolian guy keeps sending more and more diplomats, and they all just get executed immediately. So then Genghis Khan ends up waging a war against this country and topples the entire nation. It's better just to politely reject people. Insulting people really does nothing for anyone. You get a short ego boost, so don't do that. Law 20. Do not commit to anyone. Queen Elizabeth I of England is known as the Virgin Queen, and this is because she never married. But at the time, she was a hot commodity. Everyone wanted to be with Elizabeth I. And so while previous monarchs had dragged England into many wars, Elizabeth I ruled in a very peaceful time. By not committing to anyone, she kept the table open for anyone else, and was able to forge a lot of alliances between England and the other kingdoms of Europe. And she also knew that by marrying someone, she would lose the throne, so, losing the throne is not powerful. Law 21. Seem dumber than your mark. So there's these two poor miners named Arnold and Slack, and they end up finding a bunch of diamonds in the state of Wyoming. So some guy named Ralston and another guy named Charles Tiffany, they go and inspect the mine, and then they're like, wow, this is great, there's so many diamonds. And they end up tricking Arnold and Slack into selling their mine to them for $700,000 by saying, oh, the mine's not worth anything, diamonds aren't gonna be good, we'll buy it for a measly $700,000. And Arnold and Slack take the money, but oh no, the diamond mine was salted. It wasn't a real diamond mine, they were just burying diamonds that they bought. Nobody expected these two miners to actually be smart and be scam artists, so by appearing dumber, they were able to scam the rich. Law 22. Use the surrender tactic. Right after World War II, there's something called the Hollywood 19, which is basically just 19 people from Hollywood that Congress had deemed communist. Of these, there's a German playwright known as Albert Brecht, and while the rest of the Hollywood 19 argue about the authority of Congress and on what rights they have to prosecute communists, what Brecht decides to do is just submit to the authority of Congress and answer all their questions, and by doing that, only after 3 hours of questioning, even with some pretty shaky arguments through a translator, Congress decides to free him, and then he flees to East Germany to continue writing plays. So surrender now and build up your strength. It's better than putting up petty fights. Law 23. Concentrate your forces. So the Rothschilds are a rich Jewish banking family located in Germany, and they are really scared of outsiders and people that could split up the family business. So what they end up doing is concentrating their forces by marrying all their children together. That way, it's always in the family. But by doing that, they end up becoming the richest banking company in the world, and very powerful. So marry your sons and daughters to your nieces and nephews, guys. That's how you become powerful. Law 24. Play the perfect courtier. Although it's not in the court of a king today, court politics is everywhere. You have to be adept at knowing who to offend and who not to offend and yada yada. The story I enjoyed the most from this chapter was about a Emperor Sung, and you couldn't offend this guy, right? You couldn't talk bad about the emperor or say that he's going in a wrong direction. But also, if you're an advisor, you need to tell them that they're going in a wrong direction. So what the Chinese courtiers would do is they would claim that nature is going wrong. Whenever they thought the emperor was making a bad decision, they'd start talking about geese that were flying backwards or ducks with two heads, and they'd use that as warnings to not offend the king, but hopefully steer him in a correct direction. So you do that purposefully to appease people. Law 25. Recreate yourself. So just like an actor, you also need to be able to play many different roles. Julius Caesar really loved theater, so he'd put theatrics in his stuff to try and convince his men of crossing the Rubicon. And then there's this French author girl known as Aurore, but she couldn't get published as a woman, so she recreated herself and published as a man known as George Sand. So if you want to be powerful, you need to know what role you need to play. Law 26. Keep your hands clean. So there's this Italian military dude known as Cesare Borgia, and Cesare is the son of the Pope. And the Pope has this guy just conquering land all around Italy. Well, there's one town known as Romagna, which is very rebellious and has a bunch of criminal activities. So Borgia puts this military guy known as De Orco in charge, and De Orco's very harsh and puts a lot of these people to death. So now that Cesare has gotten everything he wanted out of De Orco, he puts De Orco to death. So be sure to have fall men and scapegoats because they will save your lives. And it's good to choose people that the public already doesn't sympathize with. Law 27. Play on people's need to believe. There wasn't really a main story to this chapter, it was basically just 5 steps. Step 1 is to keep your ideas vague and simple. Step 2 is to emphasize the visual over the intellectual. Step 3 is to borrow from religion. Step 4 is to disguise your source of income, which is usually just your followers. And then step 5 is to make an us versus them dynamic. And if you do those 5 things, you'll have a ton of believers in you. Law 28. Enter action with boldness. There's a Russian prince known as Ivan, and Ivan takes the throne when he is 3 years old. He's constantly beaten and teased by these people known as the Shuiskis. However, when he's 13 years old, he orders the palace guard to execute all of the Shuiskis. So by being quick and bold with this, he doesn't give the Shuiskis any time to react. So that's kind of the goal with boldness, is you don't want a reaction. Law 29, plan all the way to the end. So again, we're jumping back to our German friend Otto von Bismarck. First thing he does is he convinces Austria to go to war with Denmark in support of Prussia. And Prussia gains the area of Holstein. Part 2, Bismarck convinces the king to go to war with Austria, and by doing this he frees Prussia from any obligations they have with Austria. And then part 3, Bismarck tricks France into going to war. And this stirs up a bunch of nationalism within the German kingdoms, and all of them unite under Prussian rule. And so Bismarck got exactly what he planned from the start, a unified Germany. And from there he doesn't do anything else because, he achieved his goal. So yeah, if you plan ahead, eventually all the stars will align. Law 30, make your accomplishments seem effortless. This chapter focused a ton on the man known as Houdini, a very famous escape artist from like the early 1900s. During his shows, though, Houdini would never talk about the countless hours he spent meticulously practicing unlocking all the locks, tons of hours put into his spectacles. If you peel back the curtain, it doesn't feel as magical and cool anymore. It's just kinda like, oh, you just practiced hard. Don't ruin the magic, never reveal how much time stuff took. Never reveal your effort. Law 31, control the options. We're jumping back over to Russia with Ivan the Terrible. So yeah, Ivan is once again being bullied by his nobility. He has no power over a group of people known as the Boyars. So what he does is he leaves Moscow and just leaves some random dude to run the country. And there's a bunch of rebellions that take place because nobody in Russia likes the Boyars. So then the Boyars come back and beg like, please, Ivan, come back to the throne. And Ivan returns only on the condition that he's given absolute power over Russia. And this is a classic tactic known as I stay away and you suffer, or I come back under my own terms. Law 32. Play to people's fantasies. The Republic of Venice is in decline. Everyone's losing money. The Portuguese are now the leading trading empire of the world and no longer Venice. And in comes a man known as Bergadino, the alchemist. Now, what Bergadino promises is that if they give him money, he's gonna make gold out of random minerals. So the government gives him a lot of money and he does nothing for 7 years because the people are patiently awaiting his gold, and then he runs off to Bavaria. It would have been a lot smarter for Venice to put their money into something else, but lots of people love the fantastical idea of getting rich quick and easy, so they were willing to trust Bergadino the alchemist. So if you play to people's fantasies of, getting rich quick, you're going to be able to get a lot of money out of them. Law 33. Discover each man's thumbscrew. This is basically like discover people's weaknesses. We're back to that Count Lustig scam artist guy. He goes to Florida and he finds a new businessman named Lawler who tips too much and talks too much about his business. So he's like, I'm going to become friends with this guy. And turns out the guy's in a lot of trouble financially and his business is in shambles. So Lustig is like, hey, I have this machine that prints money. That's how I got wealthy. My family's not rich anymore either. Here's the machine. I'll sell it to you for like $400,000. Then this Lawler guy, he's like, yes, please, I need it. Because that's where he has the most anxiety. And then he gets scammed out of $400,000. So yeah, if you find people's thumb screws, like their anxiety with wealth, you're able to abuse it. Wow, what a concept. Law 34, be royal in your fashion. If you are a king, dress like a king. No better example of this in history is than Christopher Columbus, the son of an Italian merchant who goes to the Portuguese king and demands titles of King of the Atlantic or King of the Ocean or something like that. And because he's making such, regal demands, nobody's going to be like, oh, you're not a king. They just kind of accept it. Law 35, master the art of timing. So it goes really into detail in this chapter about a guy named Joseph Fouché. He's basically this French government official that survives both the French Revolution, Napoleon, and then works for the monarchy afterwards. But he was very knowledgeable about public opinion and where the shifts of politics were going. So whenever he was on the popular side of policy, he'd be out in the open doing a lot of stuff, but whenever he was unpopular, he'd lay in the low. So yeah, basically read the room. Make sure you're not doing something unpopular when it's unpopular. Law 36, disdain what you cannot have. Henry VIII wants to divorce Catherine of Aragon, but he's part of the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church says, no, you can't divorce her. If you want a divorce, you have to go to the Pope. And well, of course, the Pope says, no, you cannot divorce. So disdain what you cannot have. So what does Henry VIII do? He just breaks apart from the Catholic Church and establishes the Church of England where divorce is allowed. And the Pope's like, no, you can't do that. You can't divorce, you're a Catholic. And Henry VIII just ignores him. Law 37, create compelling spectacles. So in some country in Europe, there's this guy known as the Moon Doctor, and he has lines going out of his facility, and he just puts these sickly people up to the light of the moon and he heals them. He never says anything, he never explains the power of the moon, he simply uses the power of the moon to heal people. And the spectacle is compelling enough that people line up for hours to get this guy's medical help. Law 38, think as you like, but behave like others. So there's this Renaissance dude known as Campanella, and Campanella is an atheist, which means he doesn't believe in religion. However, this time in Europe is known as the Counter-Reformation, and the Counter-Reformation is basically the Catholic Church's arresting anyone that isn't Catholic and interrogating them. So this Campanella guy gets tortured, but oh no, he has a revelation and he turns into a Catholic, and so now he's this Catholic dude who's repented for his sins. However, he's actually just still an atheist, and the way he gets around this is he thinks like himself, but he acts like others. He writes a book called Atheism Conquered, and in the book Atheism Conquered, the atheist characters give a lot of good arguments for atheism, but then the Catholics destroy their arguments with really horrible arguments. But the Catholic Church can't do anything because it's a pro-Catholic book, but a bunch of Catholic readers read it and kind of are like, well, shoot, atheism kind of makes sense. So you gotta act like a wolf in sheep's clothing if your ideas are unpopular. Law 39, stir up waters to catch fish. Talleyrand and Fouché, they are conspiring against Napoleon, and Napoleon calls them to his office and he just yells at them and throws a tantrum like, why are you conspiring against me? You guys are horrible, evil, blah blah blah. Anyway, the news hears wind of this and they claim that Napoleon has lost his marbles and is bad for France, and public opinion of Napoleon goes down, which is exactly what Fouché and Talleyrand wanted in the first place. They didn't really have any plans for a conspiracy against Napoleon. They just kind of wanted to stir up the waters a bit to make Napoleon look bad just by acting like Napoleon. Law 40, despise the free lunch. There were a lot of just short, tiny stories in this, but basically gifts are debt unless you gift back. So gift to your equals, never ask for like discounts from people that are your equal. The Kingdom of Spain went into bankruptcy trying to find the golden city of El Dorado. So, you know, like nothing is free. Law 41, avoid stepping into a great man's shoes. You know, if you're a prince and the king dies, but the king was really popular or powerful, you're gonna have a bad time. This is sort of what happened to King Louis XIV. He didn't want to step into a great man's shoes. So what he did instead is he completely reinvented the shoes. He created the Palace of Versailles and separated himself from the old monarchy. However, Louis XV and Louis XVI were less successful. They didn't reinvent themselves and just lived the life of Louis XIV. And they were very bad at doing this and ended up having really bad monarchy reigns. Law 42, strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. So Pope Boniface VIII is conquering kingdoms in Italy. However, in the Republic of Florence, he's having a horrible time. There's two factions, the blacks and the whites, and he's a big fan of the blacks. But the leader of the whites is a very poetic and powerful politician known as Dante. And so what he does is he basically invites Dante to Rome for peace talks, but then he traps Dante, and the French king's brother comes to help the Pope, and he just surrounds the city of Florence. And without their leadership in Dante, the white faction just falls to pieces and the blacks take over. The powerful white faction was just led by Dante, so if you remove Dante, everyone else falls apart. Law 43, work on the hearts and minds of others. There's a Chinese warlord known as Zhuge Liang, and Zhuge Liang is dealing with some barbarians to the south, and they're all led by this barbarian king known as Meng Huo. So in their first battle with each other, Zhuge Liang captures all of Meng Huo's men and officers, and he frees them all instead of executing them. And he's like, please go back to your lovely wives and children. I know you'd rather do that than fight a wonderful king like me. And so his officers are very grateful. But Meng Huo is like, if you release me, I will just fight you again. And Zhuge Liang is like, please don't do that. So the next time they fight, all the officers just bring Meng Huo to Zhuge Liang, like they capture him in a coup, and Zhuge Liang's like, thank you, and this happens like 6 or 7 more times, and on the 6th time, Zhuge Liang tells the guy like, hey, this is your last time, if I release you again, I'm not releasing you the next time I capture you. And then the 7th time Meng Huo gets captured, and then he breaks down and cries, and he's like, please, I will be your loyal servant, please don't kill me. And so Zhuge Liang has a loyal prince in the south. So by slowly hammering at this barbarian king, he ended up with a loyal ally to the south instead of an entire reign of monarchs that hated him. Law 44, disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect. So there's that Fouché guy from earlier. He basically is very in tune with Napoleon, but a big thing he does is just mirror everything Napoleon does. Anytime Napoleon blackmails people, he blackmails the same people. He also has a ton of spies in Napoleon's, cabinet, basically. And he has his spies basically just tell him everything Napoleon's gonna try and do. And whenever Napoleon tries to do those things, Fouché just goes up to him and recommends the ideas. And so Napoleon just thinks, Fouché's a really smart guy. It also works as a smokescreen on your strategy because they don't know what you're gonna do because you just keep copying them. What in the world? There you go. Yeah, Law 45, though. Preach change, but never reform too much at once. Humans are creatures of habit and do not particularly enjoy change. So if you're doing something revolutionary that requires a lot of change, you have to coat it in the warmness of the past. As an example, Mao Zedong in China during the Chinese Civil War where communism is taking over. Communism is a inherently revolutionary idea to people, and you're not going to have a bunch of peasants who are typically more conservative fighting for communism. However, Mao Zedong was able to get those people too. What he would do is he would coat communism in tales of the past, basically like Robin Hood stories. The one he would tell most of the peasant people was the story called Water Margin, and it's basically like a Robin Hood story, right? There's a thief man that goes and steals from the rich and powerful and gives back to the poor, and Mao Zedong is able to coat this new revolutionary idea in the comfort of these past traditional tales. Law 46, never appear too perfect. People hate perfection and they'll envy you and hate you and despise you, so don't do it. There's this rich, powerful dude known as Cosimo de' Medici. If you know Italian history at all, the Medici's very powerful family, but they weren't really hated during their time. And this is because they never actually did much themselves. What they would do is they'd have people in the republic or the democracy in Florence. They'd have those people suggest things, and then they would fund the people. So they themselves were never a target of hatred. There wasn't much to envy of the Medicis other than they were a rich and powerful bank because, well, they'd support all the small politicians in the Republic. Yeah, not much more to say there. Law 47. In victory, learn where to stop. There's this great king known as Cyrus, king of Persia, great-grandson to that other Persian guy we were talking about earlier. Diocedes or whatever. And Cyrus the Great is conquered many a kingdom, and then he gets to the Masagutai barbarians. And he gets to these people and he captures the queen's son, and the queen hears about this and she's like, okay, Cyrus, just be happy, we won't fight you anymore, just return my son. And then Cyrus is like, no, I'm here to conquer you as well. And the son kills himself because he doesn't want to be captured by the enemy and paraded around. So then the queen is just hell-bent on killing this Cyrus guy who already has a massive kingdom, probably most powerful kingdom in the world, actually, quite frankly. And the queen basically mobilizes every man in her country to fight Cyrus. And these lowly barbarians topple the Persian Empire and kill Cyrus. And they put Cyrus's head in a jar of blood and wine or something. I don't remember the tale exactly. But basically, yeah, know when to stop. You have a very successful kingdom. You should have just stopped and consolidated. What are you going to do by just killing off some small barbarian group that isn't hurting your country and is offered peace? And finally, Law 48, assume formlessness. We're going back to China. Mao Zedong, after World War II, he goes back to fighting the Chinese nationalists. And the Chinese nationalists chase him up to the cold, rural reaches of Manchuria. Manchuria is very rural, so what the nationalists do is they end up taking control of all of the cities, and they chase the communists into the rural country. However, now that they're in the rural country, the communists take over all of the roads and highways between all of the cities, which means there's not a lot of infrastructure, but there isn't a lot of structure either. So then the nationalists find themselves trapped. Wherever they go, the communists are able to just mobilize completely and encircle their entire army. And so by remaining formless and adaptable, Mao just goes around encircling these cities and completely destroying the nationalist armies. And slowly he whittles away at the nationalists and completely destroys them. And yeah, my friends, those are all 48 laws of power. Before we get to building the courthouse, which I believe I have most of the materials for, I just want to make this little like public square area so it doesn't look like it's just on snow. We're basically going to follow the same pattern we've been doing, but while we do that, I figured I'd talk about my takes on the book. So the first thing I want to mention is this book has some pretty good lessons in it, but boy oh boy are some of the like stories used completely whack. Crush your enemies completely. Kill your child. Oh, you want to concentrate all of your forces? Marry your cousin. Like, they're just really whack examples to use. This guy's using, like, all the stories in history and he chooses those? It just seems, like, really weird to me. Like, there's a lot of good, fun stories in there, and there's a lot of good, fun stories from history that showcase the things he's trying to talk about. But no, kill your child, marry your cousin. And I think this next point kind of goes with the last point. I feel like this book is trying to be super edgy and red pill or whatever. Black pill, I don't know the colors. The law sounds like super edgy sometimes, like trust no one. Oh, don't put your friend in a position of power because they're gonna expect stuff from you. Put some random people. Like, I don't know, you made the law sound way edgier than the idea actually is. And I feel like that's part of the reason why this book is so, like, I don't know, like infamous. Like, people are like, oh, this is a red flag book. If your boy reads this, he's a red flag. Like, it chooses horrible stories, and it makes the titles seem really weird, but at the end of the day, it's still, like, decent advice. Like, obviously, don't kill your child, but if you have problems in your life, like, kill them while they're small. Don't let them fester and brew. So yeah, that's just, like, another whack thing with the book, I guess. I will say I really did enjoy reading this book. It didn't feel like I read it for like 10 or 15 or 20 hours or however long it took to read. It's very quick and it's a very fun format. I think my like biggest complaint with this book is I'm not really sure how applicable this is in my own life. Like, it's not like I deal with a ton of power struggles every day in my life. I'm not like fighting the government. Like, let's say I'm a school teacher, right? How useful is the keep my hands clean tactic? Am I supposed to like hire out my students to go like deal with the troublemaking kids? Like, that seems kind of whack. I don't think I should do that. Like, maybe I could enter action with boldness. That might be applicable. But like, going through the list of laws, like, I don't think there's much that I could actually use in my real life if I was a school teacher. So tell me what you guys think. Is this book applicable to your life? I will still say it's a fun read going through history. I love history. So, you know, it's fun to read about all the like historical power struggles in history. But at the same time, like, I'm not Genghis Khan. I would say that this book is a must-read. I feel like everyone should read this. Even if it's not useful in your own life, it's useful to know the tricks of people who are manipulative, right? You might not use these things yourself, but if someone is using all 48 laws on you to, like, manipulate you to do something, then, well, it's probably good you're knowledgeable on it. And you know, maybe some of these laws are applicable to your own life, and I feel like the point of the book is to show you how to correctly handle power. You know, great power comes with great responsibility. So this book shows you how to properly handle power if you're ever in a situation where you would have a lot of it. You know, be a leader that is not turbulent. And yeah, that's going to conclude everything I'm going to talk about for the book. Highly recommended. But yeah, I've rambled enough on the book, so I think it's time we go ahead and get to work on the courthouse for Fort Oxbow. Wow, everybody. There it is. There is the Fort Oxbow Courthouse, official government building. So we've got this cool statue in it, which kind of ruins the sight, but you can look at it from an angle and it looks kind of cool. Well, look at this. I think this is called the freeze. Or maybe this is the freeze and this is the tablature. I don't remember. But we've got a little bison dude, another little bison dude, and then a scale because, it's the courthouse, so everything is fair and equal. Yeah, I went for a very, classical, or is this neoclassical? I don't know. Very, American government building style of architecture here because, it is a government building themed in, a American cowboy town. But yeah, we've got the columns here, which I tried to go for ionic columns, which are the ones with the swirly bits on top. And you can kind of see that there. We've got the fence gates pointed inwards, and then we've got the mangrove log, so we get that swirly element as well. I kind of like it. The best columns I've built. But you walk up. This is a thing in architecture. I think you got to walk up to things of power so you feel smaller. And then we've got an interior. This thing, I really didn't know what to do with this side of the courthouse, so we kind of just have this little railing area where you can stand and, I don't know, await the court hearing. I also hid some lights in these plants, which I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that, honestly. But then in here is the cool interior. I think we do actually have a courthouse. And we've got little microphones so you can talk to the judge even though you're literally 3 meters away. And then the judge would be sitting here, Meh, I'm the judge, meh. Anyway, yeah, that's the courtroom, blah, blah, blah. However, we also have this exterior back patio. And up here, I think, you can't even see it. That's such a shame. We did a different thing here. This one's just 3 buffalo, so two little guys and 1 big old guy. Now, we've got to test something real quick. I've been getting so tired of dying somewhere, because, I break my bed and I set my spawn point, but then I break my bed, and it's really bad. But for some reason, Minecraft has decided that you can't spawn on farmland, so usually when I spawn back in, I spawn, inside of here. So now I'm hoping that because this back patio area is here, it's not farmland and Minecraft will decide to spawn me here. So let's go ahead and test that out. Ooh, it's all purple now. This is really purple. What the heck? Hopefully when we go through here, we will be looking at the sky, that would be great. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, it worked. I'm so happy. I am so sick of spawning inside there. This is great. Ooh, there's another thing I want to test, which is how does this look on a map? And yeah, I hate how the glow lichen looks on a map. I wish it'd just be transparent. One could almost call this town complete, or at least almost complete. We've got 2 more things to build in Fort Oxbow. We've got a giant railway thing right here, and then I just want to tidy stuff up, which means we've got just 2 book club episodes left, guys, at least in Fort Oxbow. Then we're on to bigger things. But yeah, next episode, we're going to be building, as I just said, a giant railway thing right here. It's going to be some nice archways, and we're going to have a train with some smoke coming out of it. Oh, but also from this spot in town, right, you can't see the government building. You can't see it at all coming into the town, which kind of sucks. But it allows for this to happen. We're walking, boom. Beautiful. It's centered up, even though this is kind of a... This I know is 1 color, but I really wanted to focus on shape, so we got a bunch of the shapes down pretty well. I don't know, government buildings are usually just white, and I didn't want white because of the snow, so I was like, red works. And netherrack is also super easy to gather. That was definitely not part of my decision making. Couldn't be the case. But yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed this type of episode, talking about books, playing Minecraft, building pretty things, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe and you can catch more stuff in the future. Like I said, next episode, we're going to be building this train archway thing here. And a train. We're going to build a train. And that's because next episode, we're going to be talking about the book Making the White Man's West by Jason Pierce. I read the book in college, but I figured it'd be a nice addition to the town. It kind of talks about definitions of who is white and who isn't white in history. And it also talks about why the Union Pacific Railroad specifically contributed to that. But I'm building a train and we're going to talk about the Union Pacific Railroad and race. Fun Minecraft topic, guys. I love Minecraft. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day and hopefully I see you in the next episode.